What's going on, everyone? Nick from Comic Culture here. Time for Nick at Night, my weekly comic book review show. Let's go over the books I read this week. So I'm going to go ahead and put my grading scale up. You know how this works. When I introduce a book, I'm going to put the cover of that book on the grading scale so you can see how they all stack up against each other. Let's get into the big two as we always do. To start with, Justice League versus Godzilla versus King Kong, issue number 1. Awesome wraparound cover to start off with. This is a pretty interesting book. This is actually taking place a little bit in the past with the Justice League. So we have like Hal on here. We have like pre-relationship, pre-marriage, Lois and Clark right now. And there's a lot of cool stuff happening. Just some regular cleanup going on right now in Metropolis. But we have some of the legions of villains teaming up, breaking into the Fortress of Solitude and stealing some very interesting artifacts. And there's this big plan right now that they're going to use like mother boxes against Superman and the different members of the Justice League. Things don't go according to plan. The villains are actually transported to a different dimension, and they're actually confronted with King Kong right here. So they have to make do with what they have. They actually find a creative way to get back home, but they bring some of those monsters back with them, and some of those monsters are arriving in Metropolis right now. So we have to figure out what we're going to do against these beasts. We cannot wait for issue number 2. There's some amazing panels in here that I don't really want to spoil for you, but just know the villains are up to no good. They brought some monsters back to Metropolis with them, and it's going to be a hell of a ride. Interesting pacing, interesting time frame to set this story in. It's like a modern book. It has a little bit of a retro feel to it. Color and art is pretty spectacular, I think. Interesting book. Will it end up being a throwaway? Probably. But will it be a fun ride until we get there? Absolutely. Check it out. Next, we're going to jump over into some Marvel books. We have the Incredible Hulk issue number 5. So we have a guest artist on here yet again, which is interesting. So we're not having our typical Nick Klein stuff. So you are going to see a dip or, maybe just a change in the art style, depending on what your preferences are. This book kind of drags on a little bit, to be honest with you. It almost feels like they weren't ready for this arc to begin. It's just weird. We still have this greater evil that's summoning all these different monsters from all over the earth to find, locate, attack, obtain Hulk for some reason. And I guess they want to assimilate, they want to pull their powers together. There's all these nightmarish creatures that are popping up. There's some cameos from some other anti-heroes that we have, like Man-Thing and whatnot. Hulk's partner in crime, she's still kind of, getting in trouble. She's kind of playing damsel in distress in this issue here. And Hulk just needs to step up and take on this big evil threat. But has anything happened to really push the narrative along? Do we know what this evil is? No, and we're kind of approaching the end of that arc. We do have a classic character showing up towards the end of this issue that we saw in Immortal Hulk, so that's going to be bringing back a lot of those memories. But, overall, I don't know if I don't like this art shift. I don't like the guest artist on an issue 5, and this is the second issue. It's like, man, come on, we have to plan these things a little bit better. And to be honest with you, the story is a little bit dragging on for me right now. We've been hearing the same thing for 4 issues now, so I just want it to progress. I want to get this evil out. I want to get this main villain in the forefront. We just haven't gotten there yet. We're only 5 issues in, waiting for something to happen still. What do you guys think? The next Marvel book we read this week was Daredevil issue number 2. Issue number 1 was okay, but if you read Chip Zdarsky's run, it might be a little confusing as to how we got here. And issue number 2 really does not give you any more explanation. So if you were hoping for some rationale as to how Matt could have escaped hell after he freed all of his friends, and then somehow he inhabits this new body with this legacy and this history and this job that he has, and how this person is pulling the memories of the past life, I guess, into the present day, I don't know what to tell you. We're still not going to get any of that in here. It's God's will. That's all it kind of says inside of here. But we do have this character who's remembering who he is or who he was and the relationships that he had. And he's kind of struggling with how to process all this. He has to run this church. He has to take care of these kids at the same time. There's these gangs that are popping up left and right because they think the Daredevil is dead, even though we have the Electric Daredevil still cleaning up the streets. Who knows? But he's coming into his own again in this series right here, and we get a little slice of life of what it's like to be in this orphanage slash church and kind of figuring out what that means and his different responsibilities and things like that. There's a massive betrayal towards the end of this. I'll let you read, but it was an overall okay issue. It just doesn't give us any idea of how we got here, which is really kind of bothering me. But I feel like they're only going to give us a little bit, and they're going to want us to forget all that stuff and just go with it. And I don't know if I'm ready to go with it. I don't know. What do you guys think? Are you reading this? Let me know. Cody Ziegler on Miles Morales Spider-Man issue number 11. I've been liking this series so far. There was a couple downer beats here and there recently with Miles, with like his anxiety, and it's messing with his spider sense. And that was kind of like, that was the whole thing I just didn't really understand or really enjoy. He's coming out of that right now, luckily, but he's actually teaming up with Blade and Bree in this issue to take on this old ancient vampire threat, if you could imagine. What's really cool is Miles actually runs into a vampire while like taking out the trash. Blade and Bree step in to help him take him out because it's not like your average thug. And then Blade gives Miles a huge upgrade in his suit, enhancing it with like holy water and enchantments and things like that, just like this ancient magic. And then they all team up to take on this big vampire threat at the end. But some of the villains or anti-heroes from the Miles run leading up to this point get in the way and complicate the situation, but it is a very fun read, a good breath of fresh air, I think, compared to the last few issues of Miles Morales, to be honest with you. So issue number 11, I would recommend it. It's continuing the good streak of Miles. I hope they continue that. All right, let's go over to Image Comics next. We have the Big Game issue number 4 from Mark Miller. You got to be reading this book. If you haven't been paying attention to Mark Miller's universe he's been building as of late, and maybe his older things, I think you're still going to be fine if you jump into a few key books and check those out. It is a book that has such good writing and such good artistry in it from Pepe Larraz. It's unbelievable. And it's kind of like watching Game of Thrones Red Wedding. It's the Red Wedding of comics for sure. Now, there's going to have to be some kind of a way to revert some of these deaths and some of these shocking events in this book, because I can't see a future without doing so. And I have my ideas of how they're going to do it, but up until now, it's been a brutal, brutal scene, a great story. If you love villains taking over heroes, this is the perfect book for you. Even ones that you maybe grew up with for like the last 10 years or so, definitely a book you should check out. I really don't want to get too much specifics of this book because I really think you should read it for yourself. So you really got to be checking out Big Game, Nemesis, Magic Order, The Ambassadors, Nightclub, all those books. Check those out. It's been a great ride. Something Epic issue number 6. What a great ride this book has been so far as well. This issue in particular was very impactful because we finally have our hero kind of coming to his own, realizing that he has to take ownership for all the things that he's done, everything he's created, all the feelings he has. He has to own up to all these negative emotions and actually do something about it to save the day. This whole series so far has been extremely creative, very well drawn, very well narrated, and it's diving into a lot of complex, deep subjects when it comes to creativity and your emotions and things like that, and how it affects the world and how everything is connected. It's just a really well done book. I'm having a blast with this one. We only got a couple more issues left, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to be sad to see it go, but Something Epic, you got to be checking that series out. All right, a book from last week that I was not able to get my hands on, but I finally got a copy, was Midlife issue number 1. I heard so many good things about this book that I really wanted to check it out, and they were not wrong. It was a hell of a ride, although a little bit depressing, but in a good way. Our main character is approaching his retirement years. He is a firefighter with a legacy of firefighting in his family, and he's just trying to figure out like the next step. Like, him and his wife are both in a position where they need to make some big changes to maybe enhance their life, do something a little bit different, but can you leave those legacies behind? You have so many relationships you've built, you have this routine you have in place. What are you going to do about that when the time comes to kind of put down the uniform and maybe do something different? Although towards the end of this book, in some kind of a crisis, our main character here develops a superpower he never knew he had, and it's going to be very relevant in the field that he's in. And what is he going to do with that power going forward? We're going to find out in Midlife issue number 2 and on. Great storytelling, really puts you in the shoes of this main character. It makes you feel like you're there in his position. So very well done. Midlife, check that one out. The next book I read from Image this week was Swan Songs, issue number 4. Now, this one was a very interesting book because it was a totally different experience for me reading it than the previous few issues. The other issues were a little bit more existential, I think. Like, I could read between the lines. It was great storytelling. It was great art. This one fell a little bit flat for me personally, but it had some pretty cool concepts behind the scenes. Now, we do follow this main character who is serving a sentence right now. It was his last day in prison. He actually gets to leave prison, go back home, and be reacquainted with the old gang. But this guy's always kind of struggled with meaning and with words and with what he was supposed to do with his life. There's all these different paths he could have taken, these different choices he could have made, and it's all represented in this Mad Libs book that he was given by one of the prison guards. And so the whole experience of this comic, the whole story that he's going through right now, is kind of from the perspective of filling one of those out. Does he make this move? Does he not? Does he meet with this guy or does he not? Does he pull the trigger or does he not? Things like that. So it's almost like a choose your own adventure. There's some creativity obviously woven in here. Interesting storytelling, interesting concept. I don't know if it hit, but I love the idea of it. And there's also a fill in the blank kind of a thing in the back of this so you can finish the story. Really cool little twist. Swan Songs continues to be a really solid read. This one fell a little bit flat, but it was still really creative on how they tried to do it. The next Image book I read this week was The Call, issue number 3 from Kelly Thompson. I love Kelly Thompson so much that I'm just trying to get through this whole series to see if there's something redeeming about it that I personally like. I love a lot of her stuff. Black Cloak she came out with recently. I fell in love with that series, with that art, with that storytelling. I really want The Call to be good, but I just can't connect with any of the characters. Basically, we have a group of people, kind of Goonie style. They get lost in this mountain. They actually find another world, kind of like a journey to the center of the earth kind of a situation while looking for a missing person. And they come across some natives to the land that are evolving very quickly, and they kind of get powers because of the energy they're absorbing in this land. Now, they're all basically handling this very, very differently. They have different power sets. The natives and the environment's turning against them, and this is a big escape mission out of this center of the earth kind of a situation, and they bring their powers with them to the real world, and the real world has changed, but how so? We're going to find out in issue number 4. The Call, issue number 3, not bad, not great. I want more. I might read issue number 4. I'm not sure. Are you guys reading it? What'd you guys think? Richard Blake on Hexagon Bridge, issue number 2. Man, the style, the feel, the vibe, the energy, the art style, just the way it's written, I'm loving everything about that. Very, very well done. The story is getting much better in issue number 2, I think, than issue number 1. I think we were a little bit too abstract in issue number 1. It was a lot to take in. We basically have Earth. We have all these different dimensions connected by the Hexagon Bridge. We have some missing people lost in those different dimensions that are linked telepathically to this child. I think it's like their son or something like that. That son is collaborating with a bunch of other people, perhaps extended family or scientists, to help bridge that gap. And they're also developing this AI that they're going to evolve over time to help this kid navigate these different hexagon bridges to get to these other dimensions. Like I said, there was a lot going on in issue number 1. Didn't really do a whole great job of explaining everything, but in issue number 2, they add a lot more context to it. And there's a really cool relationship between this child and this AI that they're developing. And it was just a really, really fun ride to see where it's going and like the different personalities of this computer AI. Again, art style is off the charts. I'm loving that. I love the vibe. I love the feel. Hexagon Bridge, issue number 2 is out right now. Might be something you want to get your hands on. Check it out. Next, we have Zoe Thorogood's Hack Slash Back to School issue number 1. Interesting book. We have this girl who's kind of fallen into almost like a demon slayer kind of a role, although she is trying to normalize herself. She needs money. She has to do whatever she has to do, get whatever job she has to get, but she also has experience with taking on like these devil demons that exist. So we obviously have a world right now where these different monsters can kind of coexist with humans, and there's a whole team out there that is set up to take them out, kind of like X-Men style. There's a mansion full of these different students, and she gets introduced to them via some altercation that she has at this place she was almost applying for. The art style is real gritty and like goth-like, and I was digging that a whole lot. I think the pacing for the book was a little bit too quick for my taste. We learn a whole lot and we move the story very, very quickly in the first issue of this book. So I feel like if she was able to take her time a little bit more, I think it would have played out a little better, but it was a satisfying read. A lot goes on. Artistically, it's a very fun book, and the whole concept is not going to be something that's super original or super out there. Very easy to follow. interesting book. So if you liked It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth, this is very different, but it is pretty fun. Check it out. Kill Your Darlings, issue number 2. Man, I absolutely loved this book. I loved issue number 1 as well. What a great second issue for this series. Now, if you remember correctly, we had this little girl that was basically living with her mom. She had a very wild imagination. The area, the surrounding, maybe even the property they lived on was property that was owned by witches, or there was some ritual or some curse that happened a long time ago. We feel like that magic is bleeding back into the present day and like mixing with this girl's overactive imagination. And we have this spontaneous murder of her mom towards the end of issue number 1. Now, in issue number 2, this girl is actually put in some kind of a foster care or something like that, some kind of like juvenile prison in a way. And of course, there's all these rumors and things like that. She's growing up a little bit, and she realizes that maybe her imagination was not quite all in her head, and some of these things are coming back to life. And there's also some mysterious power she's facing and having to deal with at the same time. So again, we're dipping back into some witchcraft. It's an overactive imagination, very colorful, very vibrant, a lot of action, very gory at the same time. I think you're going to like this book. Definitely check out Kill Your Darlings issue number 2. The last image book we have this week was The Forged issue number 4. Issue number 5 actually came out this week, but I just got my hands on issue number 4, so we're going to be diving into this one. Rucka is on this. I love this series. If you like seeing these big military type women inside of these giant mech suits, absolutely kicking ass, this is definitely the book for you. It's actually extra sized as well, not only in dimension, but in page length as well. So definitely check this one out. We have our Forge team actually, for lack of a better word, kind of at home base right now. They're surrounded by very noble, high-ranking people, and they're just not quite used to that. They have a lot of secrets. They were on this mission that went bad, and their home ship was actually destroyed. They have one of these mystical women with them as well, who have a very special role in this society, and they're actually reporting back to the general everything that they found. Now, they don't really know what to believe, but they assume the worst, and they're actually using their political power to corrupt and deceive the public, so there's not a big crisis. So if these Forged are actually telling the truth, there's a lot of bad stuff that's about to happen to this entire empire in general. So this is a pretty cool issue of learning all those behind-the-scenes political maneuvers that they're trying to make. But also, they're basically on shore leave right now, and all the members of the Forged, of course, are getting in trouble, however they know how to get in trouble. So it was a pretty cool way to see how they unwind. And it was also an interesting take on just like the political elements of this whole book and all the different manipulations and stuff like that that they're doing to the civilians. So the Forge continues to be very, very strong. I cannot wait to get my hands on issue number 5. They do a lot of work just building this empire or building this universe in the back of this book as well. There's lots of narration. There's lots of dialogue back here that provides just supplemental material for you to understand what exactly is going on in this broader universe. The Forge, definitely a sleeper hit. Check it out. All right, from IDW, we have Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees issue number 1. Very, very fun title to say. Very awesome cover as well. I think the solicitation for this book was if Richard Scarry had wrote Dexter into his books, which was the perfect quote for this book for sure. Very classic cartooning in the front opening of this book. Very pleasant town. We have all these different animals that are in this giant community, and there's a hardware store, and everybody knows everybody. And we have this day in a life of this one bear going from place to place, trying to get to the hardware store which she owns. She greets the guy working at the meat counter station place. She says hi to the crossing guard. She sees a bunch of the students and things like that. But there's also this dialogue that's happening. It's almost like a journaling, talking about how pleasant and quaint and everything that this town is. And it is. It's one of those towns where you kind of feel at home and everybody knows everybody else. There is, however, a moment towards the front half of this book where things start turning a little bit inside of her journal. She starts being very weird and alluding to this like other side of her, this dark side of her, this like beast, this demon that needs to come out and needs to act in a certain way. But she can't do it in her hometown. She actually has to act on these impulses in the big city. And I will say the craziest thing about this book is we're essentially following a serial killer in this kind of an art style. We're following the serial killer go through kind of like a normal day in a life. And we get to see towards the end of this book that maybe she's not the only one up to these kinds of shenanigans, and we might be getting to a situation where she might have to take on another killer that she has to figure out in this town. And what I loved about this book was it had a very cool balance between being just completely psychotic and adult, but it also had that charm, that innocence of this kind of an art style. So very, very cool clash going on that I would highly recommend checking out. It was awesome. It reminded me very much of like the feeling we got when we read Stray Dogs for the first time. We just couldn't imagine that kind of storytelling happening with that kind of a cartooning, right? So very reminiscent of that, but cranks it up to 11. Check this one out. Sub-genre issue number 1 from Matt Kink. We're jumping over to Dark Horse Comics. Another beautiful, beautiful book from Matt Kint, extra sized as well. So props to that team, and extra additional writer's notes and things like that. We even get some rough sketches in the back. So many pages in the back were devoted to that kind of a thing. So props to them for showing some of the creative elements to this book as well. I'm really digging that. Great story too. So we have this kind of like detective, PI, I forget his background, but he's basically running with this AI personal assistant. Everybody has one of these right now, but he's customized his to help him do certain things, get him access to different places that he shouldn't have access to. He was hired by this mega corporation to investigate this weird death of these different cult leaders inside their server rooms, and they don't quite know what they were doing, why they were there. They have some suspects who he actually teams up with, and she kind of opens his eyes a little bit and tells him there's more to the story than meets the eye. What's really cool about this book is it's a little bit meta in the fact that everything is not quite how it seems. He actually infiltrates this cult, but gets wrapped up into this other mystical world where he becomes the literature that they're actually accumulating right now. It's a very, very weird thing, but the whole book takes a big shift towards the end. And we almost have like this Matrix thing going on right now where he was in a world and now he's in this other world at the same time. And we're just trying to figure out where we're going from there. So very cool book, a lot of cool things going on, very Matrix-esque, I would say, but it also has a little bit of like Scott Snyder's Clear in front of it, written by Matt Kint. So many cool things going on in this book. Definitely check it out. It was awesome. And then we have the long-awaited return of Billy the Kit. We have issue number 6 from Blue Juice Comics. I'm so excited for this book to be back on the shelves. This was a Kickstarter. I just got my hands on my copy just the other day, and man, it put me right back into the vibes of Billy the Kit, which if you have not read that, you got to check it out. Go on there, go to bluejuicecomics.com, whatever it is, and go look for it for sure, because this book is incredibly well done. Such great humor, amazing art in here. And yeah, dude, I'm just loving everything about this and love issue number 6. We get to see a lot of Billy in here just doing what he does best, kicking some ass, but there's some locals here that have gotten their hands on a map to a secret treasure from the Sunslingers, who we learned about in the first volume. So Billy's taken this right now and he's trying to understand what it means. There's a very cool poetic thing going on between the history of the Sunslingers and Billy as he's entering this temple. Again, art was really, really great. Barry McLean Jr. is doing a kick-ass job on this thing. The guy just blows me away with every issue. Totally digging what's going on in here. And Billy, although he's in a bad position at the end of this issue, he's like totally for it and he's ready to kick some ass. So I love the attitude. I love the story. It's very charming. It's gritty. It's violent. It's full of absurdity. It's such a great read. You got to check it out. So guys, that's everything I read this week. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you read this week and what your picks of the week were down below. While you're down there, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, check out the join button as well. I would really appreciate it. But thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the comments.